I don't know about you, but I've been having a real hard time over the last few weeks, going into probably months, around customer service and reaching people. For example, I've got to send my car in for a service, and the earliest that I can get in through the dealership's automated system online, it seems to be nearly the end of the year. And then, of course, any other kind of method to try and reach them, call, email, I seem to never reach anybody. And the same is true across a few other things that I need to get sorted out, and need to get scheduled. Every time I'm forced to submit an email, or I'm forced to use a contact form, or that kind of stuff, because I can't get through to somebody on the phone, I seem to never get a response. And so seeing this headline in the Wall Street Journal, that people are calling in sick or going on vacation, but generally the workers aren't showing up this summer, rang true to me, of course. But it also makes last week's job numbers particularly head-scratching, particularly troubling, I'd say. Last week, we saw unemployment in the US tick down to 3.5%. We saw the labor force participation rate fall down a little bit too. And, we've seen this politicization of inflation and recession and definitions and things like that. And regardless of whether you believe we're in a recession or not, the two consecutive negative GDP growth quarters, or you want to take NBER's kind of more robust definition, which is many months of sustained kind of negative production or negative growth. There's this feeling that the economy is kind of slowing down in some sectors, but the jobs market seems to be just running really, really hot. And inflation, we'll see this week with the CPI print, but inflation seems to be running hot as well. And so, I read a lot of economists, I watch a lot of the coverage around the economy, and there is this general kind of sense that it seems difficult to put your finger on what's happening right now, whether we are in a recession, whether we are in a slowdown, because we've never had a recession when unemployment has been this low. So one thing that I was thinking about recently, and it's tied to this idea that the workers aren't showing up for work this summer. Many are calling in sick, many are going on vacation. That perhaps what we're seeing is something tied to productivity. And in the last few weeks, we've seen the Google CEO come out. We've seen other CEOs of large tech firms. I think Meta, Mark Zuckerberg came out too during a recent all hands call that they had. And there's been this kind of uptick around the need for productivity. And it's of course hard. I think I saw a stat last week that said something like 65 or 69 or 70% of jobs in the US have some sort of kind of hybrid component now. So people working from home and all this kind of stuff. Like productivity is tough to track in general, but it's probably even harder now. And the idea then that companies still need workers despite the economic headwinds, I think maybe speaks to something around productivity, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure, but it's an idea that's been floating around my head. And then if you tie it back to this idea that people, as a society, or at least as an economy, as a workforce, in the U.S., one of the things that we could kind of hang our hat onto over the last multiple decades, and it's one of the reasons why U.S. GDP has skyrocketed over the last 4 decades or so compared to other areas of the world. I know Europe actually is tailing off if you compare. Is the work ethic in the U.S. I mean, Americans typically have a very kind of a very poor adoption rate around what they're doing with their vacation time. Very few Americans actually use all of their vacation throughout the year. And you contrast that to kind of a European way of doing work. I heard anecdotally a few months ago that in many European countries, the summer is tough because people are typically take time off But in some, especially kind of Scandinavian countries, August is basically a wash. Nobody is at work in August. And so the idea then that, okay, we hang our hat here in the US to our productivity and our work ethic and our work rate. The idea that we're going to let that go a little bit, and see declining productivity and have everybody kind of not show up, or majority of the workforce not show up, and our customer service as a society falls, and things like, and just kind of let go of that competitive advantage is a scary thought, because that is the thing that I feel like makes America special. And so with declining labor force participation, with a falling unemployment rate, which I suppose is a good thing, it's still tough to see what's happening in the economy. But I go back to the original point, which is I wonder if we've never seen this kind of level of productivity and how hard it is to track productivity. And I wonder if on a long enough time horizon, we're starting to see the shift in the U.S. economy and the U.S. workforce towards one that looks a little bit more like Europe. My gut instinct is I hope not. But who knows, kind of on a long enough time scale. So, yeah, just thinking about, my experience with customer service recently, thinking about what that means, like why that could be happening, for example, and then what that means for in the larger context. Very interested to know what you think is happening in the economy right now. Whether you seem to be having issues kind of reaching people on the customer service level too. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next episode.